So I'm going to talk all about navigating the SEO agency landscape. My name is Hannah, I run an SEO agency. We're called Verkeer, but we're not Dutch, we're just pretending. We thought it made us sound cool. For those that don't know, Verkeer is the Dutch word for traffic, which is really what we're focused on getting you. So whether that's through SEO, consultancy, paid search, paid social. And normally those are the things I come on stage to talk about. But today I wanted to do something a little bit different. Today I wanted to talk to you about all of the inner workings of a team and how you actually would build an agency. Now, how many people work for an agency here? And how many people are in-house? Okay, so a bit of a mix, and I'm hoping it's still going to be applicable to all of you, because I'm hoping that what we're going to do is really understand kind of how to build a team, what to look for, so whether you're employing an agency, these are the questions and the things you should look for that they do, and if you're building one, this is what you should be covering off. So we're going to talk a little bit through the story of my agency. I promise it's not a sales pitch, it's just explaining how we got to where we got to, and hopefully get some practical examples along the way. So I joined Verkeer about 2 and a bit years ago now, and we were about 3 or 4 full-time employees at the time, and we're now up to 16. So that's a big growth over 2 years, and with that, there have been a hell of a lot of problems. I'm really hoping my boss has mixed up the time zones and he's not live streaming this, but agency is known for being kind of stressful, kind of intense. We're all psychopaths who are emailing 24 hours a day, and I think doing that, it's really about understanding what structure you have or you will burn out. So for us, it was about actually understanding why we were doing what we're doing. And I think for any team, it's really important to understand what motivates you. So hopefully, you have a rough idea of it, and from that, you should know what it is you're doing and why. Know what matters to you, understand how your team works, and from that, you can apply that with your strengths and weaknesses and actually grow. So when we sat down to try and work out what motivates an agency, our team came up with some of these things. So some of the more righteous ones were we like helping people. We like you to progress. And then some of the slightly more direct people were we like making money. So there's a whole range of reasons. And for us, all of this kind of tied into one thing, which was maybe we just like to win. And I always have put off saying this on stage because I don't want to sound like one of those I get up at 5 a.m. and hustle and #gains. That's not really my life. And I think for us, it was about defining that for all of our team, it's actually what's important to them counts as a win. So there's a guy back in our team, and for him, a win is that at 2:45, he goes and does a school run and then comes back to work, and being able to have diary flexibility to do that. For other people, their win is being able to go speak on stage somewhere. Whatever it is, everyone in our business is motivated by being able to tick that box and feeling like they've achieved whatever personal challenge they had for the day. Us getting to the root of this, whilst it doesn't sound like rocket science, has enabled us to apply that to how we hire. So we ask people at interview, tell us about a time you won, tell us about something you've achieved that you were proud of, and we look for them actually not how big the achievement was, but how motivated they were by the success of it. And we ask our clients it too. So in a new business pitch, we say to them, what does winning look like to you? What do you want to achieve? And we've had clients who've turned around and said, me getting promoted, make me look like a rock star when I go and show my boss. And that's just as important to them as hitting 1,000% growth or whatever it is. That's their win. So knowing what motivates you, you can align that to your partners. Aligning it to your partners means hopefully happier, better client relationships. So I think ultimately, not every team's going to have that same underlying principle. I'm not expecting you to all be sat here going, you know what, yeah, winning, achieving, that's the thing that motivates everyone I work with, because every business is different. You look at the Yoast team, and I'd say, and I'm going to just speak out of turn because they definitely haven't said this, but I think a lot of the Yoast team are motivated by doing good, and you see that by the fact that, they're giving people goats. Look at Jono's face, he's like, I'm not. But You see that from the fact that they're doing things like giving out the goats on behalf of the speakers. They're busy planting trees based on the selfies. All of those things, it's a common goal, and that has motivated them to move forward. So if you're partnering with Yoast, you'd really want to put forward how much good you could do for the world. And I think if I came up here and said, I've got all the answers, I'd be lying. So instead, what I want to do is actually just talk you through 3 core components that I think for any agency are important, some of the practical ways that we work with them, and then also hopefully things that you can kind of implement immediately. So for us, we talk about pace, performance, and partnership. And these are really critical to anything that you are doing in terms of agency work or finding clients, finding the right partner to work with. And for pace, I don't just mean how quickly things get done. I actually mean how quickly you can change direction. So those of you that are in-house, I'm sure you also have stressful bosses who suddenly pivot and say, no, this is the focus, this is the message. And I think agencies have the same, and we have this reputation for living that Mad Men-style life where you're just working so hard and moving so quick. So we want to run at things, be fast, pivot, but not in a stupid way. You don't want to break yourself by doing it. So we'll talk through a few of the ways that we implement that across the agency. And then for performance, kind of does what it says on the tin. Are you actually good at marketing? Does what you're saying work? And then when it comes to partnership, for me, it's about understanding that there is a bit of a conflict between agencies and in-house. In-house teams often find that agencies seem a bit unaccountable. They can just turn off their emails and leave you with your fire, and it's not really their problem. Whilst agencies often find that they think in-house are slow. So many people we interview that have never worked in-house are like, well, in-house would just be too easy. And it's not easy. It's slow because there's processes and bureaucracy. And actually, partnership is about understanding each other's challenges and being able to kind of build and grow together so you feel an extension of the team. So we'll get stuck into it. When it comes to pace, the first thing that I think is probably the biggest component. Is that tiny for everyone? Kind of. Great. I think the biggest thing around pace is that you actually have to get work implemented. So how many people have seen a 60-page technical audit and they've printed it and they're like, I'm going to read this and know it, and then it just sits under your desk? I have legitimately walked into a client before and seen them using an audit from an old agency as a stopper under their desk to stop it wobbling. And that audit was great. It was incredible. But nobody read it or did anything. So what impact did those pieces of paper really have? Especially if it's just a page that says 10,000 too long meta descriptions. Nobody's ever going to tackle those. So what we do is we build what we call it a digital plan. You might call it a work in progress, whatever you call it. It's a Google sheet. And on this, you'll see we've listed the phase of work that the client's in, every single individual task and priority, links to every document and statuses as to, is it complete, is it briefed, are we awaiting progress? And not all of this is done by us. A lot of this is the client's implementation. Now, you can't walk up to a client and say, do all the things I ask immediately when you're the one being paid. But this empowers you to hold them accountable. You agree it becomes the foundation of that weekly, fortnightly call, whatever it is, to say, actually, let's make sure that you're working on this, make sure you're doing the things. And that's so key, because if they don't hold up their end of the deal, you're not going to hold up yours and have the progress you need. We've previously, we internally use Monday.com, but you could use Asana, Basecamp, Trello, whatever you're using. Great. Odds are your clients aren't going to use it. Unless you get lucky and you're pitching someone and they happen to use the same software as you, they do not want to learn how the buttons work in that software. They don't want to have to log in to use something because you use it as an agency. So I think it's critical that actually use something relatable. For us, it's normally Google Sheets, but sometimes this has to be a static spreadsheet that's sent back and forth. But we do know if you put that barrier to entry of someone having to log in, they just won't do it, and then you don't get that client collaboration. And this really will just help you make sure things actually happen and keep up that pace. And the other side of pace for us is about having really strong service level agreements, or SLAs, and actually knowing how we're going to stick to them. So if you're an agency and you're pitching promises, what I would say is actually pitch how you stick to it. Don't just make the promise. I'm pretty sure about 90% of agencies in the UK would say to you, we reply to your emails on the same day. And I'm pretty sure about 80% of those don't. Like, who here has an agency that actually gets responses, they get responses from in the same day? One per, maybe two, actually get the answers they're looking for? Like, it's rare. So actually explaining how you go about it will build that trust from the client. So for us, like, using email as the example, we promise our clients they get a response within 24 hours. But we then have 3 steps that we do to make sure that happens. So the first is we use a distribution list. So you have client name @verkeer.co. That goes to everybody in the team that works on the account, as well as our operational police. And they are there to make sure that the email is responded to. So all they do, and it's just a junior that sits and does this, is checks an email got responded and then files it away when it's responded to. They're just monitoring for anything that's missed. And having those shared lists means that if your client has a tendency to maybe miss people off the email chain, only email their contact directly, you still know that somebody else sees it. So there's no risk of someone being in a meeting for the whole day, the client being ignored, them seeing it at 5 o'clock and being like, well, I'm off to the pub, it's not for me. Instead, everything gets responded to. And then we're also not afraid to chase each other in Slack. And for me, a big thing on that is actually getting your team to collaborate and not have a hierarchy about it. So we challenge our execs who work on accounts to be the ones to ask managers why the emails aren't replied to. Because it's not nice if you're a manager, for me as your boss, to send constant messages going, have you responded to this client? Did you do this? Like, it feels a bit like you're being berated, right? And it's also not fun for me. Like, I don't want to ask you if you've responded to an email. That is the worst bit of my job to nag. I'm intentionally not my team member's mother. So instead, what happens is, our execs message the people they directly report to and say, saw this email, you haven't gone back, do you want me to do it? Or how would I do that? Or can we talk about it? And it instantly pivots the conversation. Instead, our SLAs are about actually working together and we're communicating rather than telling off. And I think that makes it much easier to stick to because you don't ever feel in trouble for not fulfilling them. And then the final one is actually setting realistic expectations. So when we told our clients we respond to your emails the same day, sometimes they pull a face like, there's no way. And then we explain, well, you might just get an email back saying, seen this, I'm busy, I'll get back to you next week. Like, that's fine, because you're still acknowledging them, and you're setting their expectation as to what response they're going to get. If they're like, send me some data, fine, you might get it the same day. But if they're like, I need a full competitor analysis and I need this much depth, your email response is probably just going to give you a timeline as to when you'll receive the work. And I think actually managing to the client that that's what we're saying and that's what we mean by this promise is so important. So that kind of leads us into performance because those pace bits should enable your team to be able to deliver better work, which will have a bigger impact. Ooh. Didn't want to click that much. So when it comes to performance, we start with strategy, and we build all strategies using a framework that we call Yoast. It's not exclusive to us, so you can Google it and read what everyone else says about it. But I think having a Yoast is so critical because you've then got something to tie everything back to that you do. So when, as an agency, your client might change their mind several times a day, they might want to launch something that you think is ridiculous, but you can easily say, well, does it match your Yoast? Is it what we've defined? And to build one out, you need to start with your vision. So, like, what's your end goal? We work for a large tennis company, and, like, for them, it's be the leader in tennis. Have everyone, if they think about tennis, they think about us. And like something as broad-reaching as that, your final statement. And we talk about mission, like what are the steps that you're going to take to get there? And your mission might change each quarter, it might change each year, but ultimately your vision should be the consistent thing for your business. When we do missions, sometimes we might have 2 or 3 for a business, because there might be elements of that go elsewhere. And then objectives. So how are you going to kind of measure that? Like what KPIs are you putting against it? Is it a share of voice situation? Is it traffic? Is it revenue? We'd normally say if you're having multiple missions, try and have a mission that is purely like cash money focused and have missions that are more brand focused. So you've got that kind of depth across what you're working on. And then your strategy, kind of what are you going to do? How are you going to get there? And then down to your tactical activation as well. And that's where your specialists will shine. But that the VMOS bit without the T should be the bit that you and your clients build collaboratively. So when we onboard a client, we send them a blank one and say, write your notes in, let's fill them out together. Let's get to a point that we're all aligned. Getting your client to help you build this for them is going to mean that they consider it to be kind of that single source of truth as well. So I thought I'd show you one we have for a furniture client at the moment. Their vision is really focused about being the market leader in outdoor furniture. So if anyone needs a bench or a table, we know who to go to. And the key for them is that mission is to actually it's to really kind of drive the sales through the website. They can measure it really clearly through revenue. That's a really easy, nice objective. And you can see the strategy is actually to build awareness around the product. And then tactically, we're going to do some SEO and some paid social, pretty easy stuff, right? So the tactics bit is the bit that might be a bit more flexible, but really it's about actually understanding why are we doing it. When you know why you're doing something, you can set really clear KPIs. You can also make sure that when you set those KPIs, the client can't add anything sneaky in. They can't demand something different or start tracking something irrelevant, because does the KPI relate to that vision and relate to the mission? If it doesn't, you don't need it. And then you can also understand your performance better because you know everything you're doing and why you're doing it. So as performance changes, you can clearly see the cause. And you can also push back on requests and say, that's not best use of our time. A lot of our clients ask us to post organically on social for them, and people's faces in the front row are like, why? And I guess they see us as that digital expert, and I'm there going, if you don't already have a following, you're probably not going to get much from me sitting and tweeting for you, and that's not a great use of your budget, and it doesn't tie into your VMOst, so I couldn't possibly do it. So you kind of almost have your rules of engagement outlined here. And when it comes to those rules of engagement, when you're setting KPIs, pretty standard stuff. We always focus on SMART KPIs, so making sure they're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and they're timely. The timely one being critical. As we all know with SEO, it doesn't happen overnight. So make sure you've got really clear leading indicators in your KPIs, such as seeing a search demand go up before you start seeing revenue go up. Ooh. Okay. And then when it comes to pushing back, we typically tell our clients, if anybody at pitch process said to you, I guarantee you'll be position 1 or 2 or 3, or they promise you a number of backlinks, go with anyone in the sales process but them. If you're promising things like this, the odds are that you're either doing something you shouldn't be, way too confident in your performance, or you're just making a promise you're not going to fulfill. We get feedback at pitch that we are borderline too honest. And I think that's a place I like to be as an agency. We tell people if we don't think you're going to get results. We tell you if actually your business maybe doesn't work for digital. We've had clients that have come to us with some lovely SEO challenges, but things that, quite frankly, you're not going to get progress for 3 years, and you're telling me your project ends in 6 months. So you need to be honest and push back, and you can do that using the VMOst, and you can do it at pitch. And the same when a client says to you, we need an immediate return on investment. You can really clearly say, well, in your VMOst, we set these KPIs, and they had some times against them, and the time was not immediate. So you've got that framework you've agreed to push back, and it kind of empowers you to all be on the same page. And within that digital plan I showed you earlier, the front page, the first tab of that, is the VMOst. So it's in a document your client is in every day, and they see it every day, and then it's not a passive-aggressive when you're on a call to go, if you refer to that document I sent you 3 months ago, no, because it's actually in their day-to-day, and you just click back to the tab and go, okay, so how does that fit into here? How would we work that in? And it really quickly gets you all on the same page. And then the final thing a VMO should do is help you understand kind of why the performance was how it was. So I worked at an agency in the past, and we had amazing performance, the best performance we ever received. Unfortunately, it happened to be a recruitment site, And our best performance ever was when Google for Jobs launched. And automatically, analytics put all of that data as organic because it wasn't tagged up correctly. And they had something like a 200% uplift. And we told them it was because we optimized some pages. And it was not. It was nothing to do with us. And we just didn't realize. We thought it was related to our work. We took the credit. They asked us to replicate that, and we failed. And I think understanding why is so key. What drove that growth? And in your VMOS, because your tactics are positioned under a strategy and under objectives and under a mission, you know if the thing you did should have impacted that, and you can very clearly track it. So you can very clearly see what you were aiming for, and did it make you make a step towards your mission? And then your clients, hopefully, will also understand if the performance doesn't happen, why that was, where the fall down was. And because you've got that tracker we talked about in pace, they could see maybe it was their implementation wasn't fast enough. In that tracker, you'll have noticed there was a column on date for implementation, and that will allow you to tie then to your performance data and analytics, to your actual end revenue, to then say, well, actually, this didn't happen by then. That's why that timely objective we set wasn't met. So it all ties together and just empowers you to have better conversations. And better conversations is really part of that final point of the 3, which is about partnership and how we build a great partnership. Now, I have droned on about this book for years, so if you've ever heard me talk, I'm sorry if you've heard this bit before. But The Human Brand is one of the greatest books you will ever read when it comes to how to build a great business. And what it tells you is actually the way we relate to brands. If you think about a brand that you use all the time, someone you shop for constantly, you will use the same terms that you use to describe your best friend. So you'll talk about how friendly they were, you might say they're nice, you don't use corporate terms. But if you talk about a company you don't like, you typically go a bit more formal and you talk about if they're professional or not, and things like that. And it's really interesting because we almost associate brands as people. And the reason we like brands is either warmth or competency or a balance of both. Now, our agency delivers some great work, but we also sometimes deliver some average work. I think it's important as an agency that you can own that. Like, not every piece of work is a 10 out of 10. I'd love it to be, but let's be realistic here. And the thing that makes up for when a piece of work isn't 10 out of 10 is a warmth that you have with your client relationship. It's the fact that your client knows maybe your kid's name or that you have a dog and what you're into, and you spend half of your weekly call talking about the greatest movies of all time. Those sorts of things and building that relationship will make you sticky with your clients. It will make them not leave you. And I think part of that is actually being the highlight of your client's week. And this is something we've really been trying to push. So we work with a lot of B2B firms and a lot of legal firms. Now, I don't know how many of you have interacted with those sorts of businesses, but they are not the most fun internally. Like, when you're being told by your boss you have to turn up in a suit and be at your desk 5 days a week and you have to time log every minute of every day, you probably don't have that enjoyable a day job, no matter how exciting your day-to-day work is. So instead, your agency can be that fun bit of a break, and you should enjoy the calls. So I always say to the team, like, do you think they like coming on the call? And if they don't like the calls with you, try and cut the frequency or find a way to connect better. Don't force people to be on that call that you dread, and you're like, God, I have to talk to those guys again. So we ask our team to think about this and think about what you can bring. And like we say, so we employ quite a few younger people. I'd say like our execs, average age sits around like 22, 23. We couldn't book a bar the other day because you had to be over 21 to go there, and some of our team weren't, and we were horrified. And like with that, quite often at that age, when you're not that experienced in the world of work, you want your clients to like you as people, but you're a bit on edge, a bit embarrassed to maybe go out there and like be a different version of yourself. And we encourage the team to not like care if they like you as people. Instead, just tell them a great story. Think of it like you're on stage. Think of it that you're performing. And we actually say to the team, like, if you did nothing at the weekend, but you want to tell the client a great story about something you did a year ago at the weekend, like, do it. You need to bring something to the call, whatever that is. And part of that is about understanding high-performance conversations and the ratio. So it is apparently scientific fact that successful organizations have a ratio of 6-to-1 of positive to negative conversations. So for every time you have to have a crappy conversation with a client, you need to have 6 positive chats with them. That's hard if your performance is on a downturn. So the positive conversations, though, could just be having a great conversation about the client's weekend, and then you have to tell them their traffic's 100% down. That's fine, because you've done the positive bit. And I think we actually heard from one of our clients the other day that they just sacked some of their consultants they had, and they were like, they were right, but God, it was awful going on a call with them, because they just used to tell us how crap we were, and they were like, we know we are. That's why we've hired people to fix the problem. And if you're an agency, the odds are internally that client knows that they don't know the stuff you're talking about. They might know their performance was bad. They might know their old agency was terrible and they had to employ you instead. So you don't need to tell them all the time. They might have messed up their migration 6 months ago. Tell them once and then have 6 positive conversations and move it on and talk about other things. Don't dwell on all that negative nonsense because it just annoys people. And then as part of that, we also define a RACI, which is kind of a model of if you're responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed. And we do that on every bit of the business, with our internal team, but also with our clients. So that empowers us to make changes, because sometimes they'll say, just inform us when you've uploaded a blog. Like, if we've already read the content, we just want to be informed. We don't need to then check it again. And it frees you up to move quicker. It feels more like a partnership because they sit in this grid too. So to give you an example here, so when we sign on a new client, we have roles as to who's doing what. And in terms of responsibility, we might have someone that is responsible for like setting up key documents and access. People will be accountable for kind of the introductions, and then consulted might just be me, like somebody let me know that's happening, but I don't need to actively be involved. But I might have an opinion and want to shout out something, but they don't have to follow me. So like, at what point do I step back? Consulted is a good place to know that, and then informed, just let them know, but don't actually involve them. Doing that is just going to free you up, make you move faster, make everyone understand whose job is whose, and help you stick to all those things like the SLAs and keeping those documents up to date. That's about all that I have time for, but just quick fire, kind of my 4 top tips for if you were running an agency, building a digital marketing team. The first being, ask hard questions before a client does. So we actually talk about pre-mortems, which are, you know, if someone passes, you do a post-mortem. We do a pre-mortem on every client account. If they left tomorrow, what would their reason be? Why would they cancel? And sometimes you'll be like, my client wouldn't ever cancel. Like, that's not true. So if they did, what would be the thing that triggered it? And work that out and work out how you solve for it and keep on doing that. Every quarter, we do a pre-mortem on every account. We also pretend to be our clients in internal meetings, which is terrible, I know. But I will pretend to be the boss at one of our bigger clients, because thinking about how her brain works and what she questions, every time we present anything, she goes, but why? And so I will sit in a meeting, and even though it's not really in my nature to do that, as the team present, I go, but why is that? Can you explain that? And put myself in her shoes, so that the team are so prepped for that meeting, they have everything in. And our clients always say, like, well, you knew what I was going to ask before I asked. And it's like, yeah, because someone sits in that role internally as we run through every deck. The second point is always be prepared to break process. So we historically have had a slight problem with hiring operations people at our business because they're not flexible enough. And I think that's really key. Like, in an agency, you're working closely with so many other businesses. If you're regimented and you're like, well, our process is we don't talk to our clients on Slack, but every client wants you to be on Slack, like, you have to change, you have to adapt, you have to customize. Otherwise, your client isn't going to get that warmth from you. They're going to see you as that horrible corporate entity. And lead by example, internally and externally. If you want to enjoy a client call, as a boss, turn up and be excited to be on it. Don't be doing other work on a second screen. But also, show your client, like, if you want to have a happy call where you have a good chat, You need to bring that, and then your client will match that. So always lead by example. And also the final one is just don't try to copy. So I realise, ironically, I've told you all of the things we've done and everything that I think you should do. But if you try and do something that isn't in your nature and doesn't match the integrity of your business, firstly, it's exhausting. I had a previous role that I thought I loved because I was successful in it, but I was so tired all the time. I used to find every workday exhausting. And I was like, why is this? And I spent some time working on values and what matters to me, and realised that the business, whilst it was bloody great, just didn't match my personal values. And by undermining my personal values on a daily basis, I just was really tired because I was having to be someone that I wasn't in order to fit in there and work there. And I think it's really the same with an agency structure. If you try and fit in and try and mimic another agency because you see it successful, your team will be tired, your work will be tired, and ultimately it just won't feel genuine. And clients detect that. So it's about taking snippets of things, like maybe you liked the digital plan, but you hated everything else I said. Steal snippets from people and iterate from them and turn it into something great that works for you. And that's everything. Thank you.